I always thought I knew my father. He was the steady one, the quiet laugh at the dinner table, the soft hum in the garage when he worked on old radios, the man who smelled like sawdust and coffee every morning. When he died, it felt like our world folded in half. Everything we were suddenly smaller without him. After the funeral, Mom couldn't bring herself to go through his things. So one afternoon, while she slept, I climbed up to the attic alone. It smelled like dust and cedar, a place time forgot. I opened one of his old boxes, expecting the usual, books, tools, maybe a few letters from when he was young. But what I found instead changed everything I thought I knew about him. It was a photograph. Old, faded, the edges curled with age. Dad stood in the center, smiling. His arm was wrapped around a woman I didn't recognize, her hand resting gently on his chest. And beside them, two kids, a boy and a girl, maybe 8, maybe 10. Their faces bright, full of life. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, were 5 simple words. Summer, 2002, my other family. My heart stopped. I read it again, as if it might change, but it didn't. I sat there, the sunlight from the attic window, painting lines across the dust in the air, and I tried to breathe. My father, the man who taught me honesty, who always said truth mattered most, had another life, another family, and somehow we were the ones he kept in the dark. I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time didn't feel real anymore. When I finally stood, the photo trembled in my hand. And before I knew it, I was walking down the attic stairs, each step echoing with questions that didn't have answers. Mom was still asleep on the couch. I looked at her, the woman who had shared her whole life with him, and I wondered if she knew. Part of me wanted to wake her up and demand the truth, but another part, the part still aching from losing him, couldn't bear to break her heart twice. So I placed the photograph on the kitchen table beside his old coffee mug and whispered, "Who were you, Dad?"
I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph. All night it sat on my nightstand, the edges glinting in the lamplight, like it was watching me back. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face and hers. The next morning, I found myself in front of my laptop before I even had coffee. I typed the name scrawled faintly at the corner of the photo, M. Turner, and hit search. Hundreds of results appeared. None of them felt right, until one did. Marianne Turner, Asheville, North Carolina. The same town where Dad used to go on work trips. My stomach twisted. I clicked through an old local newspaper article. It was about a community fundraiser for a small bookstore owner named Marianne Turner. The photo showed her standing outside the shop, smiling, surrounded by 2 grown kids. My heart stopped. They were the same kids from Dad's photo, just older. I leaned closer to the screen, tracing their faces with my finger. They looked happy, normal, like people who had no idea I existed, and maybe they didn't. For the rest of the day, I walked around the house like a ghost. Every room felt different now, like the walls had been keeping secrets too. Mom noticed, of course. "You're quiet today," she said while making tea. I almost told her everything, but the words stuck in my throat. She'd already lost the man she loved. I couldn't take away the memory of who she thought he was. That night, I took the photo again, tucked it into my bag, and whispered to myself, "I have to know." The next morning, I packed a small suitcase, printed out the address I'd found online, and drove toward Asheville. Every mile felt heavier, like I was moving further away from the father I knew and closer to the one I didn't. By the time I reached the town, the sun was setting behind the hills. The bookstore sat at the corner of a quiet street, painted pale blue with a small bell above the door. I parked across the road and just sat there, my heart thudding in my chest. Through the window, I saw her, Marianne, arranging books on a shelf, the same warm smile from the photo lighting her face. I wanted to get out, to walk in and ask, "Who were you to him?" But my hand froze on the car door, because for the first time, I realized something that scared me more than the truth itself. What if she didn't even know I existed?
The bell above the bookstore door chimed softly as I stepped inside. The air smelled like paper and dust, the kind of scent that feels like time standing still. Marianne looked up from behind the counter, her smile polite but warm. "Hi there, can I help you find something?" she asked. Her voice was kind, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to speak. "I'm just browsing," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. She nodded, returning to our stack of books. I walked through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines. Every step felt like trespassing in someone else's world. After a few moments, she spoke again, breaking the quiet. "You're not from around here, are you?" I shook my head. "Just passing through." She smiled faintly. "Most people who come through here are looking for something." Her words hit deeper than she realized. "Yeah," I whispered. "Something like that." I turned to leave, fear gnawing at my resolve, when a framed photograph near the register caught my eye. It was him, my father, younger, happier, standing beside Marianne and their 2 children. My breath hitched. The photo I'd found at home was no accident. This was his other life. My knees felt weak. Marianne noticed my stare. She followed my gaze to the frame and smiled softly, almost lovingly. "That was my husband. He passed away a few years ago." Her words cracked something open inside me. I know," I murmured, my voice trembling. She frowned, confused. "You knew Daniel?" I nodded slowly, tears burning behind my eyes. "He was my father." The silence that followed was unbearable. Marianne's eyes widened, the color draining from her face. What did you say?" "He was my dad," I repeated, my hands shaking. "He raised me, in Charleston. My name is Emma Hale." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she sank slowly into the chair behind her, her eyes glistening. "He told me he had no children," she whispered. I felt my heart collapse in on itself. "He lied to both of us," I said quietly. Marianne covered her mouth with her hand, trying to steady her breathing. "He used to leave for business trips. Sometimes he was gone for weeks. I always wondered." Her words trailed off, the realization dawning in her eyes. We sat there, 2 women connected by the same man, both grieving the same ghost. Neither of us knew what to say. It wasn't anger that filled the silence. It was sorrow. We had both built our lives on the same lie, and now we were sifting through the ruins together. Finally, Marianne spoke, her voice small but steady. Would you like to sit? I nodded and took the chair across from her. For the next hour, we talked. About him, about us, about the years that had existed side by side, separated by secrets. Every story she told felt like looking at my father through a new lens that was both familiar and foreign. When I finally stood to leave, Marianne reached out, her hand trembling as she touched my arm. "He loved you," she said softly, "even if he was too weak to do it the right way." I swallowed hard and nodded back. He loved you too. And somehow, in that moment, forgiveness didn't feel impossible anymore. The next morning, the rain tapped gently on my window. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, split between two lives. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hate him for lying to us both. But all I felt was this dull, aching confusion, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and doesn't go away. Before driving back home, I stopped by the bookstore again. Marian was there, opening boxes near the counter. When she saw me, she smiled. Not awkwardly this time, but gently. "There's something you should see," she said, motioning toward the back room. She led me into a small office, cluttered with old papers and photographs. On the desk was a wooden box, worn smooth by time. She ran her fingers over it before sliding it toward me. "I found this in his things after he passed," she said quietly. "I never understood why he kept it locked." She handed me a small brass key. "Maybe it was meant for you." My hands trembled as I turned the key and lifted the lid. Inside were envelopes, a dozen or more, each one yellowed at the edges and sealed with my father's handwriting. My name was written on the first one. "Emma." Just seeing it made my chest tighten. I opened the letter slowly, the paper soft and fragile beneath my fingers. His voice came to life in the ink. "My dearest Emma," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I've failed in the only promise that mattered, to protect you from the pain I caused." My eyes blurred with tears as I kept reading. "I never meant for any of you to live half a life. I thought I could fix what was broken by giving love where I'd taken it away. But love isn't something you can divide. It's something you give whole." I pressed the letter against my chest, feeling the words like a heartbeat. He wasn't just hiding from us. He was hiding from himself, from his guilt, his mistakes, his fear of losing everything. Each letter told a different piece of him, his regrets, his longing, his confusion between duty and desire. In every word, I saw a man who was broken in ways I had never known. Marian stood quietly beside me as I read. When I finally looked up, her eyes were wet too. She said, "He loved us both. He just didn't know how to do it honestly." I nodded, unable to speak. For the first time, I didn't see her as the other woman. She was just another heart caught in the same storm. Before leaving, I took the box with me, not as evidence of betrayal, but as proof that he had loved us in the only way he knew how. When I hugged Marian goodbye, it wasn't awkward or hesitant. It was quiet, understanding. Two lives, finally connected by truth instead of lies. As I drove home through the rain, I realized something. The past can hurt like a scar, but it can also teach you where to stop bleeding. And maybe forgiveness wasn't about erasing what he did. Maybe it was about remembering who we both were, broken but still capable of love. A week later, I found myself standing on the small hill where my father was buried. The sky was pale, the kind of gray that feels like it's holding its breath. The wind carried the scent of pine and rain-soaked earth, and for a long time I just stood there, unsure of what to say to a man who had loved me and lied to me all at once. I placed the wooden box beside his headstone. My fingers brushed the carved letters of his name, Daniel Hale. For years, I had said that name with pride. Now I said it with understanding. I whispered, "You could have told me. You could have trusted me to love you anyway." The words broke on my tongue, fragile and soft. I opened one of his letters again, the one I couldn't stop reading. It said, "Emma, when you're older, I hope you'll see that people are not just the things they do wrong. They are the reasons behind them." I smiled sadly. "I see it now, Dad. I finally see it." In the distance, the trees swayed quietly, their leaves whispering like they knew our secret. For a long moment, I let myself cry, not from anger, but from release. Every tear felt like letting go of a story I'd carried too long. When the tears stopped, I placed a small photograph on his grave, the one from the attic. He was smiling in it, his arms around both families, frozen in the one lie that had finally brought us all together. I pressed the photo into the earth and whispered, "You don't have to hide anymore." Before I left, I looked up at the sky, a soft glow breaking through the clouds. I thought about Marianne and her kids, about the quiet conversation we shared over coffee the night before I left Asheville. There was no bitterness in her voice, only compassion. We decided to stay in touch, not because of him, but because of what we understood now, that love, even when broken, can still build something whole. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The guilt wasn't mine to carry anymore. He had made mistakes, yes, but he also gave me something else: the courage to forgive and the strength to move forward without losing my heart. When I reached the road, I turned for one last look at the grave. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered, and for the first time, the word goodbye didn't feel like an ending. It felt like peace. As I drove away, the rain began to fall again, soft, gentle, forgiving, and I realized something my father had never learned: that truth, even when it hurts, is the purest form of love.